Welcome to Just Lyrics with Jake Michael. Today's guest is Christine Winchester, who has been writing lyrics for a million years and has been performing everywhere. Because I don't believe in introductions, I will begin with the first question, which is, when you were 5 years old, what sort of music did you hear? What was in the air? Or were people pushing you towards something as a wee child?
As a wee child, I think I was probably influenced by the music that was in my dad's record collection. I don't think my parents were real big radio listeners to the pop music of the day.
Hmm.
They've
When
even
would
told
this be?
that would be around 1966 or 67. I think you and I are probably about the same age,
I think so too.
if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that would have been the Beatles and stuff. But so I think my dad's record collection that he played at home, probably also some NPR, if that's what existed back then, but some public radio classical. So he had a large classical music collection, and he has a large jazz music collection, specifically Dixieland jazz and like old standards and things like that. So
And where would
uh,
this be?
where did
Where'd
we
you grow
live?
up? Yeah.
Well, that would have been when I was that young. It would have been northern New Jersey. I was born in Brooklyn, but we moved out pretty quickly after I was born. They weren't from New York at all, my parents. And we lived in northern New Jersey for a little bit, and then we bought a house in Morristown, New Jersey, which is also up there. It's not
Yeah.
essential, but up there a bit, and lived there for several years. So that would have been this period of my life.
And so the records they're buying, they would be, you said they weren't, you're almost implying they weren't really hip, that they were listening to.
They weren't up on the. Now, my mom maybe a little bit more than my dad, and I think she liked. I don't think she went out and bought records though. So if she had the radio on, I might have been hearing some pop music, but not rock music, but maybe some ballad type of singers and things like that that I don't even know because she didn't talk about music. And my dad plays a piano, and he's a ragtime piano player. So hearing him play in the house and
uh,
hearing his records would have been my first music experiences.
and where were they from?
My dad's from Illinois, Chicago area, and my mom is from Michigan.
Okay, so
They
Midwestern
met in New York City.
transplants.
Yeah.
That's
So I've always felt like a Midwestern, roots or blood, but an East Coast girl.
that's me actually too. So did you ever
Yeah.
go back to Illinois and stuff and hang out with your like grandparents and stuff like that and catch
Well,
like.
the grandparents on my dad's side were not alive. He had a sister though, and I'm sure we visited her in Elmhurst, Illinois. But my mom's family was more who we saw. My grandmother lived in Lansing, and we went there often.
Uh-huh.
And visited her over the years in Lansing. So yeah, so I got to see that.
Well, that what's interesting about that is I always thought that your songs were like you were slowly doing a musical, and I didn't know what the plot of the musical was, but you had these songs that were just like,
Yeah.
yeah, this one is this part of the musical. And it just seemed like eventually you were going to have a musical.
I totally agree with you. I never did that, but I ended up going into theater and majoring in theater in college, and maybe it's still in my future that I'm going to write a musical.
Right.
I should mention that too. My parents also owned records of musicals. I remember listening to Oliver and My Fair Lady, and so I'm sure that was definitely in there.
Yeah,
Definitely
yeah.
in there.
So you went to college and did theater stuff in college, but as a songwriter, what was the first song that you wrote that made you think, okay, I can actually do this? And for me, it was like I wrote songs that sounded like somebody else, but then there was one thing where it was just like, oh, this is my unique voice as a songwriter. Do you have a similar experience?
I definitely have a song that I felt like I'm a songwriter now. I don't know how unique it is, but I certainly felt proud of it and felt like it was my own creation that I had written a song. I'd already been playing guitar for a few years. I just taught myself. And I wrote it down here, 1979. So I was 16.
Okay.
Um, and my first serious boyfriend had gone to college, left high school and was away at college. And this was about him, how he is now uh, away from us in the hometown.
Uh-huh.
He maybe was visiting back home or something like that. And I was inspired to write this song called Changes that was about how much he's changed since he's left,
Uh-huh.
our
Now,
hometown,
was
going off to
that
college.
was that true? Did he actually change, or was this your 16-year-old angst brain
I
saying he had changed?
I have no idea. I didn't keep in touch with him after that, so I have no perspective. I mean,
No,
every
but no,
kid
no. That
changes.
actually no. That answers the question. It was all made up. You did you didn't keep in touch with them, so this was
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody changes. They go to college, they grow up. He went from a high school student to a college student. So, uh, yeah, he changed, but it was my way of expressing this loss, the loss of our relationship.
yeah. But that still shows that you're manufacturing something. You're manufacturing sort of this vision in your head of of what you imagined he's going through, and maybe you were right,
Yeah.
but it's
Oh, I don't mean I didn't keep in touch with him as in I didn't know when he came back. I meant like in subsequent years after that.
oh
No, I definitely talked with him when he came back from college, and
oh
no, yeah, yeah.
oh,
I'd say this was very true. I think this song and many others I wrote for years after that were only very, very true. Like I
uh-huh.
would only write things that were like a journal entry. Like if it didn't really happen, I didn't feel right putting it in the lyrics.
Okay, that's interesting.
Now I think I can fabricate things a little more, and I can write off of a prompt, and I can have more imagination, write from someone else's point of view. But at the time, everything I wrote was right out of my head, exactly how I was feeling.
Okay, cool. That's well,
Yeah.
that will relate to later questions here.
Mm.
Um, so here's the make believe one. It's 1964. Do you know the Brill Building in New York?
Yeah, I,
Okay.
I actually am familiar with that.
I love it.
That's definitely in my wheelhouse of songwriting, so I get
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So let's say it's 1964. You won a job in the Brill
That's
Building,
good.
which was in New York, and they
Yeah.
would hire songwriting teams. And Carole King was there, and the guy she wrote with, his name escapes me. And if you're trying to get a job as a lyricist there, what? Give me your pitch. Why should I hire you? You're a real estate salesperson. Sell yourself. Make me buy you.
I think that one of my strengths is that if you put me in a room with no distractions and, maybe a little digital recorder and a piano, I will come out with something great. And I learned this when we'd have our songwriter workshop days, and you sit in a circle and they give you this prompt: write about the sky, write about the sky and a lamp, and then you have to go off in the like laundry room of the person's house that you're in and like huddle and write for 20 minutes. I gotta write something. And so many times I would cut, my mind was so open and I was so cut off from my life and all the things that are going on in my real world that I just could focus, and I would just write something and then play it for my circle and be, that's really good. How'd you do that in 20 minutes? So
So
I think I can work fast if I'm concentrating.
when did you start doing those like exercises like that? Like when you started writing, or was it when you were
No.
30 or what?
Well, when I started going to the Philadelphia Area Songwriters Alliance, which was in the late 80s, so I was in my late 20s.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, but all through high school, college, writing, and even post college, I think I was pretty unedited and uncritiqued. I just was writing what I wanted to say and maybe playing once in a while. I didn't play much, in public or
Uh-huh.
anything. I'd play for my friends or record it on a tape recorder or something. But it
Now,
wasn't until I got with Pasa and then I started getting some critique and yeah.
now, do you find now when you do those things, are you better at it? Or is it the same? I mean, is it the same level of, can you go into a songwriter thing and someone says, write a song and you're like, boom, throwing it out? Have you, or is it the same? Do you have to like recreate the wheel every time you start up doing that or something
Oh,
else?
I see what you're saying. I pretty much have to create that situation every time. And
Okay.
if I'm home without any workshops or times I'm getting away to do a songwriting activity, I tend not to write at home. In
Uh-huh.
fact, it got so much like that that years would go by, and the only new songs I had finished were ones that came out of workshops
Okay.
because I just wasn't generating ideas at home or sitting down to work. I might sit down at home to get it done, to get the song idea shaped up
Right.
and worked on. But I found those critiques both in the workshop and then in the song critique circles that we'd have. I'd bring the song that was in progress, get more critique on it, and I just found those invaluable.
When
And
you're,
then after a while, I could hear in my head what others might say. I could kind of critique myself or look
yep,
at it with an outside ear, and
self-editing. It's like they say
yeah,
in writing. You
I
can
think
learn
I've
that.
gotten better at that. Yeah.
Do you now when you the songs that you wrote without a workshop, was there any particular environment where they came to you? Or some people have the shower principle where they're in the shower and not distracted, and boom, something comes to them, and then
Yeah, well, it's kind of
other.
like I said. If I'm forced time, there's a time limit. Now I didn't create something great every time for sure.
Right.
I might come up with nothing or a melody line or two lyric lines or something. But the times when I really came out with a melody and some interesting chords, it's just a matter of having that time element and having my mind clear and
Yeah,
not worried about what I'm doing tomorrow and how much money's in my bank and whether it has to be, you have to be focused. I
yeah,
have to be focused
yeah.
on that.
That's cool. Okay, now here comes the sort of embarrassing parts, which is give me an example of a song. Oh wait, no, no, this is not embarrassing. This is still technical. We'll get to embarrassing later. Um,
Great.
Give me an example of a song that you wrote with a strong narrative element, tells a story, and I think you've got a lot of those.
It's funny you say that. David, my husband, said the exact same thing, and I never think of myself as writing story songs.
Uh-huh.
I think other people write story songs, and I don't. And he said the same thing. He said, "Oh, well, you've got a number of those." And I was like, "Which ones? What are you thinking of?" And he named like three off the top of his head. Well, this one, this one. I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, that is kind of a story." So,
So,
so I thought about it a little more. I
so
do.
give me some, throw me some lyrics from one of these story songs. One of the songs that he said was a story song.
Okay, well, he said this one called "Stranger." I didn't pull that one. I pulled some ones to talk about it. Family in Chicago. He pulled. Okay, so "Family in Chicago" is a song about. It's funny because we were just talking about Chicago and everything, and this was fabricated out of the idea of Chicago because my dad is from Illinois. It has nothing to do with my dad or family or anything, but that Chicago piece came from there being Chicago in my background. And it's about a woman who's escaping an abusive relationship, and she's going to run away to Chicago where she knows she has some family that's going to take care of her.
Uh-huh.
So you said some lyrics. So it starts, it's 10 a.m. by the clock on the kitchen wall. She hasn't moved in nearly an hour. She thinks about the laundry waiting to be done and the milk just sitting there getting sour. She hears a baby cry and finally stands and winces at the pain in her rib. Memories of last night come rushing back as she lifts her child from the crib. And it happened again, and her pride's wearing thin. That's the first verse.
Uh-huh.
And it goes on to where she gets away, she packs her things,
Right.
she gets
Okay,
out
good.
the door, and ties the baby's hat under his chin, and then she's. I skipped some of it, but she goes through a process of getting dressed and putting some makeup on her eye where she's bruised, and then she gets the baby going and gets out the door, and she's on her way. So
So
it
she
kind of,
does go.
yeah, she
Okay.
definitely does.
'Cause
Yeah, she's
As you're
out
te-
there.
as you're telling this story, I'm like, Is she gonna go or is she gonna stay?
Yeah,
Good.
she's. It ends with and she knows she thinks about staying, but she knows he'll come home and say he's sorry again, but his apologies just leave her cold. And she thinks it's a sin, and she says, no, never again. She writes a note for him to find in their empty house, and she ties the baby's hat under his chin.
Uh-huh.
And that's, yep. So that is a story, definitely. It's not a long story.
Yeah,
It's a short story, but
somebody was I said something like the blues is like haiku. It's like telling a story in the least amount of lines possible. I think
yeah.
that's the same thing with a lot of lyrics. So actually, at the beginning you set the stage, the time, the setting, all that stuff like that, very elegantly. The other side of songwriting is impressionistic aspects, where you're just like stream of consciousness ideas, not necessarily following any plot. What have you got for that? I don't recall you doing a whole lot of like psychedelic
Okay.
stuff, but maybe I just never heard it.
Well, you may never heard it because when I have written things like that, it does tend to be things that I don't play as much.
Right.
And because it's not my go-to way of writing, I'm very,
Right.
very, I
Right. Well,
write
you said
in
you like to
full
write from real.
sentences.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's so different, when I do write something and I like it, I'm very proud of it. I'm like look at this poetic song I wrote, because it's just not my
Uh
usual way of writing. But there are a few. I can give you a little bit of a song called "Only Human,"
huh.
which I never play. No, hardly anybody's ever heard this song.
Good.
And it was very stream of consciousness. It sort of was about a friend of mine, but it went off from there. It goes, she's laughing with me, we sound like children. She's waving her arm, it shines like silver. She's trying to smile, but she's only human. She'd love to stay, but it feels like midnight. She says to me as we touch the moonlight, she's got to see she's only human. And then the refrain is, celebrate your own imperfectness. Own your resignation like a bell. Hold it in your palm for the world to see, but not to hear.
you know, there's lots of parts of that that don't make any sense because the song is only human and you say, your arm is silver. And I had this vision of like a robot.
Robot! Well,
it's like, but that.
I thought of like a bunch of bangle bracelets.
See? Well,
But see, in another way of writing, my usual way of writing, I would have said her bracelet shined or something. But this was
no,
this was the poetic me.
That's good. And
So that's an example of what I've done. A couple that are like that.
yeah.
That's an example.
So how about like crazy wordplay, which I don't think you do a whole lot. And maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like you're pretty direct. Again, the Broadway musical thing, where somebody is speaking and they're not going to be using some crazy twisted language. But
yeah, but a lot of Broadway shows have very clever wordplay.
that's true.
So I mean, it's true. But I thought of this one. Let's see. I have to put my glasses on.
Okay.
I'm resorting to that.
Comes out.
I just want to pick the rest. Okay, I'm not going to do that one. 63rd Street, which is a song you do know, I'm sure, because I wrote that a long time ago, and I ended up playing it regularly for many, many years. It's one of my best songs. In the chorus, the chorus is disfigured beauty, dilapidated pride, and I've always liked that line. I've always felt like it was a wordplay situation. I mean, it's not a funny or anything, but it's another poetic type of writing, I guess. But it's describing the rundown buildings along 63rd Street in Philadelphia
Oh,
at the
okay.
time that I was
Yeah.
driving on that route a lot. So disfigured beauty, dilapidated pride, but ugliness like beauty is only skin deep. And if you look, you can see the past hiding like a ghost here on 63rd Street. But the disfigured beauty and dilapidated pride, I like.
Uh-huh. There's a couple interesting things is when you do your lyrics, when some people do their lyrics, they're like, and I do, and then other people are reciting them. You're in the
Well,
reciting crowd. And
they're
then the
very
other,
integrated with the beat and the feel of the
yeah,
speed and
yeah. And then the other
yeah.
thing is so far, you've done like a Chicago travel song, you've done the 63rd Street, you got a lot of locations going on.
Hmm.
I don't know whether that's
No, those happen to be. I don't know. Though I will say this: after I became a realtor, I looked back and realized I had written at least three or four songs that all had to do with houses and moving. Of course, I
uh-huh,
had gone through a period of my life where I'd moved frequently as a young adult,
uh-huh,
but it made me laugh. 63rd Street's a perfect example,
yeah,
and one called "Moving Blues."
right.
Um, so it was funny. I was made destined to go in real
Right, and
estate.
actually, when you did that 63rd Street, I was thinking down on Main Street or now, see, I can't remember them. It's the song. The guy who did with Silly was anyway. I'm not going
Yeah,
to get it, but it's in my head and I can't get it out. I can't come up with the lyrics. Uh,
and a song called South Street for South Street, Philadelphia, and a song called Small Town. So yeah, I guess I do have a lot of those.
well, hey, it's a theme. It's weird because I would do these songs about Indiana and my cousins and my grandparents, and it would be in Philadelphia. It would be like, "Ooh, you're so exotic," because most of the people here are like Italian or Irish or Jewish, and it's like, "Ooh, he does a song about a farmhouse in Indiana. This strange exotic guy." All right, so here now we go into the embarrassment part, which is, oh no, actually this is not embarrassment yet. I'll get to it. Uh, your big hit, and I don't know what you would see as being your big hit, but I think you've got one or two that it seemed like everybody always wanted to hear. And
I think that
why do you think that your big hit is your big hit compared to the other songs?
okay. Well, 63rd Street, I think, would have to fall into that category. And then more recently, the other one that's been my big hit is I'm So Over It.
Uh-huh.
And it's really catchy and upbeat and strong with a message of an uplifting hope of bettering your life. So people are just latch on to this what's the second one I just said?
63rd Street,
No,
the Hope
I'm
song.
so over it.
Over
I'm
it.
so over it. I'm so done with it. Uh,
I think I do know that song.
so over it. I'm so done with it. I can't think of it now. But anyway, it's real powerful and upbeat
Huh?
and catchy, and it's not specific to anything. It doesn't name any particular thing that you're trying to get over,
Uh-huh.
but it's universal,
Uh-huh.
and that's definitely one that's done well for me. Though
I'm
I haven't recorded anything, so it's can't say like I didn't sell anything.
right. Well, none of us.
No hits that
I
way.
said songwriters. I didn't say successful professional musicians. There's a big difference. Um, that's interesting. Yeah, people. That's always the toughest question when I ask people that. They're always like, yeah, I don't something about it. It's like it's about as far as I can get. So here's the embarrassing parts. Give an example of a song that you uh, uh, a song that it's critically panned, but you like it. It's kind of a guilty pleasure, a song or a genre that you're almost ashamed to admit that you like.
Um, I'm going to answer two different things. One is the band Kiss.
Okay, that's a good one. I don't think you need to come up with another answer. You've you've won the prize.
But at the same time, I'm listening to Kiss. I'm listening to like sappy 70s love songs that are like insipid, and like I listen to them now and they make me want to throw up. Uh,
Wait, so
but
like what? Give I want to know
um,
what
like
what you think is sappy.
Diary by Bread. These are
I
songs I
don't
learned
really
to play
know
on
it.
the guitar. I I found a diary underneath
Oh yeah.
me and
Okay.
started reading about me. Well, anything by Bread, some America, um, other one-hit wonders in the '70s that just had these like Alone
AM.
Again, Naturally. I wrote down Run to Me, How Do You Mend a Broken Heart. But they were songs that I learned to play as a young starting guitar player in this
Sure.
pop book that I had, and they just stayed with me as being what I knew how to play. And so then when I look back and find an old notebook or an old book, and I see that I played that, I think, oh God, I wouldn't play that now.
That's good.
Uh,
That's good. Okay.
but
So then the opposite of that is what critically acclaimed music do you dislike? Something people think that everyone should like, and somebody who is as refined as you should like this, but you don't.
okay. In a couple different genres. First thing that comes to mind is Les Mis and other musicals that are like operatic or
Uh-huh.
like really super classical and operatic and
Uh-huh.
high singing like opera. I like musicals that are more folksy and stuff. But I remember Les Mis got so much attention. I'm like, oh, I hate it. And there's
That's
others that are sort of in that genre. And the other thing is some folk. Even though I'm a folkie, there's definitely some folk music I do not like,
yeah.
and I don't like Bob Dylan. I don't like real like Joan Baez songs, some of them, and like it's a little I don't know what it is. It just not. I like a little bit more pop. I like to move a little bit more into the pop and rock genre than the Mamas and the Pop. Well, the Mamas and Papas were a little poppy. The
Sure.
Paul and Mary and
Yeah, I know.
Pete Seeger, and like I'm not quite over at that end of the spectrum. But many of my friends love it, and like,
I know.
oh, I love
I know.
that. Oh, that's so great. And I'm just like, okay, I'll get through
I
it.
always say I like rock and roll more than I like folk music, but I love folk people a lot more
Yeah.
than I
Oh,
like rock and
good.
roll people. Folk
They're my
people are just
people.
so great, and rock and roll
They're
people can
definitely my
sometimes be
people.
real assholes. So
And I didn't discover that till I was here in Philly as an adult. And really, after I met David, we started doing folk song society things. I didn't run in those circles at all. Didn't know any folk music. Didn't know. Oh, I was going to say something about the Beatles when I touched on it earlier. So I definitely wasn't listening to it. Well, I don't think I was listening to it as a kid. If I heard something, I didn't know. It wasn't until after college that I found out who the Beatles were.
yeah, that
I
happens. That happens a lot. I didn't listen to like Jimi Hendrix, and there was a lot of stuff where I did not know that until 20s or 30s, and I was just like, oh wow, so that's what everybody's talking about. Yeah.
Beatles. I did know Paul McCartney and the Wings. I liked a lot of Wings, and there were some John Lennon hits in the '70s. But the Beatles was an unknown entity to me. I until I kind of caught on in the '80s of like, oh, and that's their song too, and that's the Beatles, because I may have
Yeah.
heard the songs, but just wasn't. I'm still not a huge Beatles fan.
Is
There's
there
another one. I guess.
is there anything like recently like that you have discovered that that other people would have discovered a long time ago?
Uh, well, not that I could think of. That the Beatles is always the one that blew my husband's mind.
Yeah,
He just couldn't believe it. He's
right.
9 years older than me. He
That's
grew
about
up with the Beatles, and he couldn't believe it. He's
yeah.
like, "What is
No,
your head
no,
in the sand?"
no. But that
um, I also don't like. Love Joni Mitchell, but I do not like her like later jazzy stuff, and I'm
uh-huh.
not a big jazz fan.
Yeah.
So. Jazz gets a lot of attention, and I don't really have much. The only kind of jazz I like is the Dixieland jazz that my dad used. It's, you
Right,
know, upbeat and like that, but any kind of like modern jazz
right,
and
right.
don't like it.
Well, that's good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the attention span of the American public is only like 20 minutes long, so we'll wrap it up, I guess. Where can people hear your music online or anywhere else? Lately,
Um,
there's nowhere.
I'm not playing anywhere except for if you come to any kind of pasta circle that's on Zoom. I usually play a song in there. And as when we're back to being in person, I certainly will be going to those kinds of things.
And Pasta
I
is
also
the Philadelphia area
Phil
songwriters,
Alliance Alliance PASA
and people
Philadelphia
Google that,
Area
they can find
Songwriters Alliance.
people can
It's
Google that.
Pasa Music.
Yeah.
It's pasamusic.org to find out when our events are.
Uh-huh.
But the best way to find my music would be on Reverb Nation
Uh,
and Sound SoundCloud.com and Reverb Nation.
okay. So that's where people can go. And
That's where I've uploaded music there.
super. Well, it's been nice seeing you. I haven't seen you for a while. And
You
or
too, Jake.
maybe once
Thanks for
the
having
world
me.
gets back to normal. And you actually were very instrumental in when I was starting out. You were running a couple different open mics and stuff like that, and helped me out a lot to get accustomed to playing in front of human beings. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're the Folk Factory, right? You came out to the Folk Factory in Mount Airy?
Yeah. And then you had stuff at
Yeah,
the
and we were.
Pain place or the Unitarian place.
Oh,
Did that open?
yes, at our fellowship, Tom's Place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, okay, good.
Yeah,
Well,
that's right.
thanks for showing up. Christine, you write good
Thank you.
music. Bye bye.
Thank you. Love you. Talk to you later.